Welcome to Family Business Breakthroughs, where we bring you time-saving, money-making strategies to improve your business even more. With over 3 decades of experience serving multi-generational family businesses, we've got time-tested solutions that get the results you're looking for. Listen in and get ready for your next breakthrough. I'm your host, Jim Berner. We are continuing our discussion about the 3 pillars of Meridian method of vision, people, money. And we started with vision, diving into strategy, structure, and systems. Then we discussed people and the culture, leadership, and execution. And now it's time to talk about money. We
Money.
love,
Woo!
and today we're talking about cash. I have with me Betsy Bixby, founder and owner of Meridian Associates. Meridian has been and is the leader in supporting family business owners, next gens, their teams to achieve their goals towards family legacy, growing their communities, thriving their companies. And we do this through one-on-one coaching, on-site strategic planning, live events, online education, financial analysis, and it continues to go on.
On and on and on.
Yes. Betsy has over 30 years of experience supporting family businesses, and her insights come from real-world practice. Betsy, I mentioned in a previous episode that your background is a former banker. And, I
Yes.
want to encourage everybody to go on to Ask Meridian, check out Betsy's full story about this. But would you mind just taking a little bit of time and discussing, how Meridian got started and maybe the focus on cash flow?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Jim. It was really interesting. Even as a banker, what I noticed was that owners would know a lot about their bottom line, but they weren't very savvy about cash and the fact that the cash balance in the company or the availability of cash could be really different than profit. And in fact, a company could have a super profitable period of growth and have no money. And
Mm.
so, yes, I was a banker. I had a guy come in for a loan. A week after I made his loan, he asked me for a date. That's basically how all this got started. But yeah, I had a real nose for cash flow, and I wanted to be able to help companies have cash as well as profits. So, you know, they aren't hand in hand. And a lot of times can be opposite. Even when a company is having it is absolute best profitability, it can squeeze on the cash. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, that was my heart was, I've seen the difference in owners when the cash is plentiful and they feel a lot more secure and
Oh,
confident
yeah.
and driving forward when there's cash.
Oh, yeah. And, you touched on a really good point, and I really want people to focus on this as they listen to this episode is that there truly is a difference between cash and profitability. And in the next episode, we're going to be talking about profitability, but we're all about cash here. And so, are you still seeing business owners like getting tripped up on cash flow and on cash and
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's so easy to have a boggle in your company and not even realize it. The other day, Jim, I was talking to an owner and they had the person who was in charge of their receivables get sick and had to be out of the office for a couple of
Mm,
weeks, got one of those nasty viruses,
gosh.
and they didn't have backup. And all of a sudden, they weren't collecting. And that person, what they would do is make sure that everything was coming in. We do a lot with electronic funds transfer, getting it where you don't have that dependability on to people
Mhm.
actually paying a bill and writing a check and all those things. But in this case, it was to the tune of about a $300,000 swing. And
Oh my
that was
goodness.
yeah, in 2 weeks. And that was really, really difficult on the company. Now, the good news is as soon as they figured out what was happening, got their attention back onto it, they've corrected that. But yeah, cash is crazy, right? I mean, just it's just not always attached to business cycles, and so you really have to manage the two differently, which is why we
Mhm.
show them as two different subjects. Your cash is one thing, your profits are another, and you've got to manage both.
Mm. Now, I can't even remember if I have this later on at all, but uh, because I'm really interested. We talk about this all the time with from the business evaluation side and just kind of collaborating on different things. But are you seeing more people move towards maybe like not having as much debt and really focusing on their cash now too?
Yes, but we're going into the financing pillar, Jim. You can't do that. You can't give them the sneak approach yet. We're gonna do that in another
All right. All
podcast.
right.
Yep,
Sounds good.
yep.
All right. So let me pivot to another side then. So, um, the last 5 years, we've been through, gosh, craziness from the pandemic. It's been a roller coaster ride for many business owners. Do you suggest keeping any type of specific amount of, cash reserves on hand for emergencies? Do you have this kind of rule of thumb, or is it kind of change between industries? What's your take on that?
Well, Jim, one of the things that I noticed as we were working with family companies over the years was some companies have a revolving line of credit, and they borrow different amounts on that, have different availability, and then they have their cash. So as I was working with companies, I would see companies that were like, oh yeah, we're fine, we've got $200,000 in our cash account or whatever it was,
Hmm.
but they also owed $1 million to the bank, right?
Mm.
And so I came up with something. It's not an accounting text or whatever. It's a Meridian method thing called true cash position. And true cash position means how much cash you have in your bank account plus how or minus the borrowings that you have. So you have to look at, do I have availability? So in answering that question about, do I need to have, how much cash do I need to have on hand? If I have a $2 million line of credit and I have zero borrowed on it,
Hmm.
then that's not a big deal, right? Because at any time I can have $2 million. So what I like to think about, instead of, as for instance, an individual, I'm a big believer in having, as an individual, like 6 months of cash on hand and a cash
Yeah.
reserve, right? That I can
Hmm.
use at any time. For a business, that's not always appropriate because they're doing acquisitions and there's a lot more volatility, right, to
Hmm.
a business's cash. But available cash is a very reasonable thing to be looking at. And again, available cash to me, 6 months is going to be really hard, but 90 days worth of available cash uh,
Mm.
is a really good number to have. And then a lot of companies, if you see companies that have had really dire circumstances, the first thing that happens is people don't get paid. So I
Mhm.
think you look at, what are your normal payroll expenses, what's your normal fixed expenses, all those kind of things, and make sure that you have that kind of availability sitting at your fingertips. And again, we're going to talk more in another episode about how we look at
Mhm.
financing,
Yeah.
and how all that works. But just, keeping cash. The other thing I'll tell you, Jim, is that
Yeah.
families get along better when there's cash. you know, People aren't
Yes.
quite as tense. They're not quite as tight,
Yes.
all that. So that's another thing I found, is that cash actually, makes family dynamics and relationships much smoother.
Yeah.
When there's a problem with cash, that's when things don't go well within families, and when blame and different things start. And so, yeah, cash is super important. But true cash position is what we aim for.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, it's a Meridian thing. I just noticed that people need to learn to look at all those things together. And available cash is another way that you can look at it, but I like to see the true cash position get strong. That's cash
Now,
minus the bank borrowings.
yes, I
Yep.
was gonna ask there because obviously you want that number to be positive. That's the key. Uh, Now, is that the best financial metric that you usually suggest in people using to?
Well, there's some other, when we look at cash, Jim, there's usually three things that really impact cash, and that is accounts receivable collection time, it's your inventory on hand, and it's your
Mhm.
accounts payable timing. So those three ratios are absolutely critical for most companies for what's happening in cash. Now you can have other things involved in there if you're growing and using cash for acquisitions and those sorts of things. But in the normal just day to day, keeping those three metrics in front of you will keep your
Mm-hmm.
cash strong. And usually when there's a cash problem, it's related to one of those three metrics.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because we call that the critical cash factor
Yep.
on how we assess all of those together and the
Yeah, when you're
changes
doing
that really
valuations.
occur,
Yeah. Yeah.
which really does show you just from the basis, kind of like what you're saying. Well, man, things kind of really went down here. They got faster. We collected our money, and so, but then all of a sudden, I got a supplier, or a vendor asking for my money faster.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Funny how
It's
that works
all
sometimes.
interrelated. Yep. Yep.
So, I know kind of your practice on how you do things here with reviewing cash, but like how often should business owners be reviewing cash balances or changes in cash or working
So
capital? Like what should they be
yeah,
doing?
so there's another tool, Jim, that I'd like to mention that anytime that we're working with a family company that has had cash strains, right? And it could
Mm-hmm.
be cyclical, seasonal, whatever it is. I actually like seeing a cash forecast.
Mm,
And
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so we've helped CFOs, not just me, we got a whole team of us here, to really put together forecasting of what's happening with receivables and payables and inventory, being that those are the three things that really impact cash, and having a cash forecast, which to
Mm-hmm.
me is very important. And I actually have our team do it here on a weekly basis to say, okay, I want to know what cash is coming in, what cash is going out, and how do we sit? And I do that on a 7 days. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you're in a company where the cash is super strong, like I can remember, Jim, my first Meridian customer ever was actually a CPA, which was really fun. And I was doing these cash flow reports, and he wanted me to do one. And that was like I only had one employee at the time, right? It's really when we were tiny. And this guy had, a couple $1 million sitting in a zero interest bearing checking account. And cash was really not on his mind because he had a lot of cash. Well,
Mm.
and of course, I can remember chastising him about that and saying, you need to go earn some money on this, even though you are like super profitable. And, that was a good lesson, by the way, that sometimes the most successful companies are the ones seeking outside advice. And I thought that was really interesting. Uh, and actually, we sold his company I think it was about 15 years later, worked with him and
Mm.
all the way up until the time that he sold. So that was really fun. But, you know, is cash, I call it the lifeblood of the business. It really is. And when I was first going out and speaking at conventions and people figured out, this whole thing about cash flow, 3 decades ago, it really is, man. Cash is king. Your profits can go all over the place, but cash is king. You've really got to figure it out. So the frequency depends upon where you are in your cash positioning. If you're in super strong cash positioning, really need to look at it once a month, and you just
Mm-hmm.
your metrics, make sure everything's on track. If you're in a critical, like cash critical, I've helped companies with looking at it daily. Like you need to know what's going on daily and looking at those
Right.
forecasts and really managing. So it just depends upon where they're at.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good advice. Obviously, it changes for each individual company. Betsy, really, one of the basis is for, this episode here, is you wrote this book called The Seven Quick Cash Fixes. I got it right here in front of
Oh, look
me.
at you. Yep.
Have it. And I'll tell you a quick story. Don't mind the timing on it, but I was speaking to a gentleman at one of our last events, and it was probably like 2 o'clock in the morning having this conversation with him. And he said one of the greatest contributions you have made was the seven quick cash fixes. He said this
Oh my
was the most
gosh.
powerful thing that he's ever received, and he uses it all the time.
Wow.
And it's an incredible tool that he was able to go back in and just kind of start. talking about everything that was in it and how it was so
Oh,
useful for him to be able to do. But I would love if you could just, tell the listeners, what can they find in this book, because it really is everything we still use day in and day out with
absolutely.
helping our customers. So it is truly powerful. It's a life changing book, especially for the gentleman that I spoke to at our past event, which was just this September. So
Wow.
what can they find in this book that's going to be like changing for them in their business?
Well, Jim, it's a really, really simple primer on just the 7 items that I thought could move the needle on cash. And it actually came about when I was designing our Empower coaching, and part of that,
Hmm.
is the total team coaching and it's business fundamentals and all of that.
Hmm.
Um, uh, I was getting some outside advice on that. I'm a big believer in outside perspective, by the way. That's what Meridian's designed around.
Yeah.
And the person I was talking to said, Betsy, it'd be so cool if you could just have the first session in your coaching be something where it would pay for the entire year's worth of service and they could get it completed within 30 days. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's where the 7 quick cash fixes came from, was me kind of racking my brain about, okay, what are some things that people can do super quickly, like super, super quickly. Number 7 takes a little bit more time, but the rest of the 6, Jim, are like, and it's not rocket science. I just want everybody to believe that. It's not like there's anything brilliant about it. It's really business fundamentals, right? It is,
Hmm. Hmm.
making sure that you're just going through some things like super quickly and saying, okay, where can I get some really quick hits? So just to give an example of one that's in the book, I'm not going to cover all 7, but I found that a lot of companies have deposits in with insurance companies, with utility companies, all different types of, suppliers, whatever. And because we work with multi generational family companies, a lot of times they've been sitting around for, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever. And nobody ever thinks about just going to them and saying, hey, could we have that money? Um, you know,
Yeah.
you
Hey,
guys
can I get
now
that back?
know that, we pay our bills and we've been around now for 70 years. You can probably, and I can just remember this one company had over $300,000 there.
Goodness.
It was crazy, and it was kind of buried. Like the owner didn't see it on the balance sheet. It was just kind of like hidden into like, deposits or whatever. So
Hmm.
that's just one thing, is to go look and say, okay, do we have deposits? And people will say to me, oh, well, Betsy, you can't get your deposit back from an insurance company. It's like, oh, yes, you can. And you just say to them, it's so simple. Um, we have a new policy where we don't have deposits. So what's your alternative plan if we don't have deposits? And I swear there hasn't been anybody with an insurance company that required the deposit anymore. They just said,
Mm.
oh, yeah, of course, we have this other plan. And boom, there you get your money back. It's crazy.
Goodness.
I
That
know. It's
sounds
like,
it's
it's not rocket science. It's like just super, super easy. And on the 7, there's several of them that's just make a phone call, and if it doesn't
right.
work, fine, you at least gave it a try, but sometimes it does work.
Right.
And yeah, so it's just super simple. Anybody can do it, type of things. Again, number 7 is a little bit more, might take a little bit more time or a little bit more complicated, but it works too. And, we've literally had people, get from just a few $1,000s up through over 7 figures, Jim. That was really
Wow.
fun. Yeah, over $1 million
Uh,
bucks. So that was
Goodness.
fantastic. Yeah,
This
it's
is
awesome.
there's 12 chapters, and obviously there's the, 7 quick fixes that are in there as well, but gosh, you go over, credit to customers, you talk about inventory, as you kind of mentioned. You're going over everything from the borrowings that are in here, even customers. Do you have
Mm.
satisfied customers? That's a question that you ask in there, and that's a whole, chapter that you have kind of going on with number 9. And then I also want to just kind of talk real briefly. You've provided some really good uh, actions in here, and the bonuses that you've provided from credit policies, risk ratings, are those all things that you've kind of either just developed over time? Is that from banking, or how did, how did a lot of this stuff come to be? Was it just practice that, you've seen?
Um, it's a combination, Jim. There's never,
Yeah.
one thing, right?
Yeah.
So, it's been just kind of building an arsenal of those things over the years and what's working. And, our clients are so awesome. Sometimes they develop things that they share.
Mm,
We have
mhm.
our Meridian members, and there's just tons of tools on there that, developed over the years. I started really paying attention to the receivables and credit piece, just because that was kind of the cash mess up for a lot of our
Super,
companies.
super fast receivables right here. Yes.
Yeah, and it was just like, oh my gosh, like, you don't have to do it this old fashioned way, and it's like,
Yeah.
let's get this together and get this better, and yeah, and again, super simple, easy to do. We even have on our Meridian members a thing called Total Credit Success, which
Mhm.
goes into all that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, the book is just a great start, and then our Meridian members, super low cost way to engage with us if they want more training for credit person or credit
Mhm.
policy or this or that. So yeah,
Yeah, and then just to kind of reiterate, it's 150 pages. Uh, it's a quick read, really, in just a few days you can, start putting these into action, and or
it's the
even
cash Bible.
yeah. Yeah.
In the
You
easy to
betcha.
read format, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and some of the other, feedback that I've received in the past has been, I read a chapter, I put things into play, then I go into the next chapter, I
Yeah.
put those things into play,
Yeah, you gotta take
and
action.
they
Yeah.
started kind of just slowly putting it in and then going
Mhm.
back again, and then even having some of their teammates kind of start doing it and going
Mhm.
through it to understand really the basis of why they were going about doing it, and just passing it along and then having conversations too. So
Yep.
that's all, man, that's great, that's really good. So, Betsy, I want to thank you for your time today. Again, sharing the insight. As always, I want to encourage people to go back, pause at certain points, jot down the notes, because as Betsy kind of mentioned in here, just a couple of things. Again, I always write down the notes that I get, and then I save them off to my side as well. But you talked
Nice.
about the availability of cash. Looking at like that 90-day mark. You talked about true cash position. Using that as a metric, always want that to be positive, always in there. Your critical cash factor, where we talked about receivables, payables, inventory, those changes, and even, you're the cash forecast. Depending upon what your positioning is on your cash at this moment in time, you might need to review it daily, you might need to review it weekly, you might need to review it just on a monthly basis. So it really depends on who you are on, your positioning. So I want everybody, again, to go back, pause, take those notes. And if you're listening right now, message me your questions and comments. I want to hear from you. My contact information is down in the show notes. And as a reminder, Meridian is here to serve you and your family. If you're looking for any form of succession planning, leadership, next gen coaching, even the financial analysis piece that we also help family businesses on, uh,
Mhm.
out to us. We'd love to be able to help assist you. Check out the show description for notes and links to the website, and also our events and everything else that we can provide as well. Hit the subscribe button down below. Catch all of our new content. Betsy, I want to thank you very much. And your connection to the book, that's also going to be down in the show notes as well.
Ah, good.
People can grab that as well and grab a copy of
All
it too.
right. Awesome.
So thank you very much for your time. Thank you everyone for listening in. And I'll see you next time on Family Business Breakthroughs.